I am Haley Bash, the founder and executive director of Donor Organizer Hub, and we train and coach everyday people to fundraise for causes that they care about, and specifically progressive causes. So, thinking about anything from a mutual aid fund to a campaign to a neighborhood level nonprofit that they're looking to support. And so the question specifically you're asking about, why fundraising? I mean, the title of the book that I co-authored, The Accidental Fundraiser, I think covers it for most all fundraisers. Nobody grows up being like, I want to be not a ballerina, not a firefighter. I want to be a fundraiser. I personally fell into it as a volunteer myself over a decade ago. I was a software engineer in the Bay Area, and I was hearing a lot about how the tech industry was gentrifying and displacing long-term residents, and I didn't love being a part of that. I was one person, but I wanted to do some steps to fight back against that problem that the industry that I was working for was creating. And so I went to a lot of introductory meetings of various community organizations that were focusing on tackling that issue, but nobody really knew what to do with me. They were like, "Do you want to build or fix our website? You're an engineer, right?" And I would say, "Thanks, but no thanks. That sounds real boring." But then one organization showing up for Racial Justice Bay Area, they were just starting to form their chapter out here. They had the creative idea of, hey, why don't you fundraise? You work in tech, you used to work in finance in New York, you went to this big cult school, University of Michigan Go Blue, and ask them for money to go to local Bay Area organizations that are fighting gentrification displacement. I was like, oh, that seems interesting. So I kind of caught the bug, uh, not only by doing it myself, realizing that as I was asking people for money, it wasn't that they were, blocking me and telling me to go F off and, why are you asking? I don't have money right now. The economy's tight. People came back and thanked me. They were like, thank you for letting me know. I didn't realize this organization existed. I feel like I'm making a difference in ways that I can. I also caught the bug for training other people to do it. It just felt contagious. I grew up in the world of multi-level marketing, so instead of, I guess, selling leggings and the Tupperware, it's selling the idea of grassroots fundraising. So I trained our chapter. I trained members of other chapters across the country and just kind of kept training and coaching people on how to build scalable, distributed volunteer fundraising teams. And a few years ago, I got asked by three people I really didn't want to disappoint. Uh, hey, Haley, how about instead of making this the Haley's Homies, side project, you offer this as something for our larger progressive movement ecosystem? Because grassroots fundraising is something that we haven't been doing the past 30 years as much. It's been big foundation funding, it's been wealthy donors writing checks with lots of zeros on them. We haven't developed the skills for everyday people to really see themselves both as donors and fundraisers. And I took the beck and call, and 3 years later, here we are. We've trained, at this point, thousands of people. Uh, we have, I think, at this point, almost every state now. I think if anybody here is in either Iowa or Hawaii, hit me up. But I feel like not only have we trained people, but I feel like we're learning to be adaptable from the people that we train. They teach us about the local context that they're in. They're seeing things that are constantly shifting, not just with the news cycles, but also, I don't want to be on Zoom anymore. I've been on Zoom for 5 years. Like, let's get our people in person. That's the trend now. It could be a trend, a few months from now as we enter winter season of, ooh, it's cold and I have seasonal affective disorder, and maybe actually we do get back on Zoom. But it's been this really beautiful iterative process of being able to continue to tailor our training and coaching based on the people that we're training and coaching.
Wow. Okay. So Josh and I were talking back and forth before we got on, and we were thinking, okay, why fundraising? What did she see in it? And like, you nailed it, because I heard process engineer. So you saw a gap and you're just
Mhm.
like, dun, 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 this is how we're going to fix it. Because your brain works in that. Because fundraising, from reading your book and really understanding, which we'll get into, it is a scientific process. There are some things that have to be in place. There's some levers, there's some layers, there's some skill sets. And then you are an amazing people person. So now this all makes sense. So now I get it. Right.
And I will say
Right.
for people that are listening, if math and science were not your favorite classes, don't freak out and think you can't fundraise. It's definitely not rocket scientist level. It's just there are step by steps, absolutely. Something I lovingly tell people when they're like, "Wait, why did you do fundraising?" I'm like, nobody gets mad at you when you fundraise for them. Like there's a lot of people that are feeling overwhelmed. Like, what do I do right now? How can I step up? And in all those back and forths, nobody's going to be mad if you raise a few $100 for their cause. They will
Oh,
be
they're
quite
going to be
delighted. You'll make some new friends
totally.
that way.
Totally, absolutely. Okay. So let's dive in because there's going to be one thing we have to talk about. We have to talk about the fundraising ecosystem in the Democratic Progressive States. And we have to talk about your letter that you penned with Act Blue with
Mhm.
a colleague. But let's lay the foundation for our listeners just in case they don't understand how the ecosystem works. What I want them to understand is before we get into the article about the mothership strategies that pretty much triggered the letter and pulling back the curtain is candidates who are running for federal office. If you're not aware, there's limits on how much they can take in per donor. On the federal level now, it's 3,200. They raised it primary, and then for the general, again, it's 3,200. And then depending on what state you live in, candidates are limited at how much dollars they can take from individual people, organizations, etc. So think of it like, okay, you've hit the limit, but I'm a donor and I want to give more dollars. Where do I go? What do I do? That's why you have what I call the soft side, that 501c3, the 501c4, PACs, and as Josh brought up earlier, churches are now in this space, and that's another piece of the conversation we'll have to dive into. But that entity, that piece of the triangle, does an aggressive amount of fundraising that a lot of us see in our phones with all those texts that come through. So it's piece of the equation. You can't have it. I always say to anybody asking me, like, again, I'm the process person that in order for any state to be successful, we have to have a strong state party. We have to have a strong soft side and amazing candidates with support running for office. Any of those pieces of the triangle are kind of debunked. We struggle. But one thing that has come up is on that triangle image that we're how this whole system works is Adam Bonke. How do you pronounce his last name? Adam
Monica?
Bonica. Yes, thank you. Adam Bonica wrote this really in-depth analysis because when you are in the fundraising space and when you're taking money, it's public information, and he dove into the numbers. And he really dove into this one entity, this strategy group, that fundraising is challenging. A lot of organizations hired Mothership Strategy to help them navigate the fundraising space. And what he uncovered was pretty astonishing in a nutshell for the readers. And Josh will end up dropping the link in the show notes for those who want to read the article from Substack. As an example, they raised about $282 million since 2018. Out of that number, a negative correlation, 1.6%, actually goes into the efforts of electing candidates, whether it's door knocking, direct campaign within the firewalls that organizations are allowed. So when we talk about why people hesitate and get the queasies about fundraising, this doesn't help. So talk to me after reading this article, what triggered you to write a letter and to call out another piece of the equation? So I'll let you jump in from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to give some history lesson for people, shortly after the presidential election in 2024, Act Blue was sitting on $100 million in cash. That's a lot of money. That is much more money than probably any of the candidates or leaders that are listening to this call have access to. And something that we heard time and time again from Act Blue was, oh, we either don't have the resources or we don't have the time. Well, after a really big loss, and a lot of funds in, it just the timing. There was no more excuses that could come from them. So, myself, Josh Nelson, the founder and
Yep.
CEO of Civic Shout, and 140 other people across the progressive consultancy, nonprofit leadership, academic, and other
Hmm.
spaces came together to pen an open letter that went out in December 2024 to Act Blue, calling on them to use some of that money to invest in stronger donor protections. They had shown some signs during the presidential campaign because there were some PACs that were impersonating as the Harris campaign. And the Harris campaign, of course, was like, hey, we're not receiving this money. Can you shut this down? And so they showed some signs of willingness. Uh,
Hmm.
it took, honestly, it's tricky to say behind the scenes. I'm sure that they were slowly but surely starting to implement some of these changes. But I think Bonica's article, when it came out, really sped up the process. And
Yeah.
so shortly after Bonica's article came out, ActBlue put out a new account use policy for any entity that is using ActBlue. So candidates, PACs, 501c3s and C4s. And it specifically had, at least in verbiage, a lot
Hmm.
stronger of policies of what was and was not acceptable to use on an ActBlue account. Fake donations like, oh, 700% match between now and
Oh,
midnight.
I hate those, right? Those drive me crazy. Like, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so it's been, some time now since that has been enacted. And when it hit the 30-day mark, Josh and I released a 30-day sort of report card for Act Blue to share how the enforcement has been going for that. Uh, some things have been strong in their follow up, like them making it clear that donors can file these reports in the first place. But there's a lot of room to grow. For example, apparently it's okay to say you promised to donate to people who did not in fact promise to donate, or they've currently been skirting and allowing for 3-minute countdown clocks that show up on fundraising pages and of course
Mm,
make people think, oh, I only have 3 minutes and then this fake match is going to expire, to also exist. And the three, but we
yeah.
all know that these are not actually acceptable policies. But what ACLU is facing right now is a tension in sort of their conflict
Accountability.
of interest. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're getting a cut of whatever these different entities are fundraising, and it's by any means necessary, right? A tragedy of the commons. So what ultimately has inspired us to keep them accountable is that as a software provider for arguably the biggest infrastructure on the progressive left, uh, they have a responsibility to play in ensuring that those that are fundraising with Act Blue pages are doing so in a way that is consensual with donors, where donors are understanding exactly the investment that they are putting in, whether it is a real match, what the timeline of that match is, uh, you know,
Mhm.
to feel that there's actually trust, because that trust builds and extends beyond that one scam pack that sends that text message. It creates a reputation for the entire ecosystem.
Yep. You nailed the key word here, trust. Because if we don't have trust in this system, the ecosystem that we're all operating on, especially when it comes to dollars, then it's really hard for all the organizations to move forward. Because after the article went out, you saw so many people say, I'm done. I am not donating anymore. And that really, it hurts. It hurts all these movements. And the other thing that the ones that kill me is when you get those texts, Josh, I'm sure you got them, when you see, oh, Barack Obama endorses this candidate. He didn't endorse this candidate. That's when I was like, from somebody who sent out fundraising emails, I find that really nervy. Like, how can you actually send that out in good conscience, knowing that you do not have permission to use that person's image or their how do you know their values align? You're making a big leap on benefit of that person. So have you heard any direct communications from them about, yes, we're working on A, B, and C. We'll get back to you in another 30 days, 60 days. Where are we at this?
So we have not heard a timeline, and we are currently awaiting to reschedule a meeting that they abruptly canceled on us recently. So if anybody from Act Blue is hearing this, we would love to speak with you and figure out next steps so that we can all support in your mission to connect grassroots donors with
Right.
campaigns and causes they care about. One thing I also want to name in what you're mentioning, Mary, is that a lot of times the the blame, like when we talk about trust and how it's blanketed, we don't think about how this ties into small nonprofits that are shuttering down ballot candidates that can barely scrape by to get on the ballot, to get voter contact software. The people and organizations that are hurt the most by this are the so-called small guys. uh, you know
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that connection needs to be made a lot clearer for those of us who are the small guys to stand up against these practices. And I have had confidential interviews with dozens of digital practitioners that are the so-called source of this problem. And in some ways, I can empathize with them. They are trying to raise an unprecedented amount of money in a very short amount of time. One consultant that runs a very influential firm that does some of these practices that we do not appreciate told me, well, if Congress outlawed my job, so be it. That makes
Oh,
sense.
geez.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's, this group of a few dozen, mostly
Yeah.
20 something white guys that are kind of building this tragedy of the commons problem across the country.
You know what gets me about this, and I'm so glad. Thank you for taking on and spearheading this and being part of is accountability. Being part of the conversation is in the world that I came from, the corporate sector. We would have these rough and tough conversations. After a big event, we would have what we call these meltdown calls where we talk about what worked, what didn't work. But at the core was you never violated your trust with your consumer. You never violated your brand ethos. And
Mhm.
there seems to be an okay at all costs. Well, they do it. We should do it. And you hit the nail on the head is because we are seeing in this our work to save democracy that our down ballot candidates, the one running in the state houses, are actually the front lines of saving democracy right now, and you're hurting them the most. I think people really need to center that because we are now learning our civics lessons. Me, the former history teacher, was yes, the policy happens in DC, but we all know the implementation happens in the states. So, however they slice and dice that implementation is how we feel it in the states. So, it is really important conversation. So thank you. Any thoughts, Josh, do you want to add? Because this is something that affects all of the nonprofits and
Yeah.
candidates.
Yeah, and I not to be too much of the devil's advocate here, but where like how do we find the balance of like who cares how the money comes in? Like obviously there's a separate ethical question. Like I'm not arguing that the ethics are a different thing. But who cares if we're up against evil, right? We need to raise money. Who cares how we raise more money than them to do our thing? Why is it so important from your perspective? And I know you talk about it in the letter and in your book a bit too. But why is it so important to do it in an ethical way?
Yeah, no, excellent question, Josh. I think it goes back to a good old power mapping analysis that a lot of organizers tend to do. Is we should look at what we have as strategic capacity. On the right, they don't need their grassroots base as much to do things. They have money power to take over that. On the left, we actually need our base to be activated for many things in addition to donating and fundraising. We have a disadvantage when it comes to, getting people to the polls because of voter suppression. We have a disadvantage when it comes to being able to get those doors knocked because we are not able to hire as many staff. We need more volunteers. And if we're alienating our voter and volunteer base, we don't have the conditions to win in the first place.
Yeah. It goes back to trust. It goes back to trust because when you're going to
Right.
open up the wallet, people have to know what their dollars are going to. What are you going to use it for? And do I trust you in my relationship with you? I remember when this started coming out, because the GOP were doing it, the recurring donations, where they hid that button where if you donated, it was triggering, you didn't realize that $25 was actually $25 a month, and they were hiding that, and that got switched. But didn't somebody, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody pulled all that data, and there was this one woman, even in Indiana here, where I sit, I want to say it was close to $80,000 that she didn't know she was recurrently donating.
That was to the progressive side, actually.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
Monica's
Thank you for
piece that was
clarifying.
covering how scam
That was
packs
the other.
are
Okay.
preying on seniors on the left. And at the end of the day, when people are do the whataboutisms, but the left does it, or does the right does what the left does, I'm like, I get it, and it goes back to we need our base more than they
Yeah.
need their base.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think it comes back to the value connected piece too. Like I think sometimes it sucks. And I talk to nonprofits and value driven like entrepreneurs about this all the time. Like it sucks that you have to care about your values because it would be so much better if you like just ran like an oil company and you were like, and just dump it in the river.
Yep.
Like it would just be so much easier because who cares? Right? Like it would be so much easier to live that way and to run a company that way, but you'd be missing the whole point of why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. Right? And so like being able to build that trust through values in the long run will build that stronger foundation in those diehard people. And that same lady who knocked on my door 3 times during the Harris, well, I don't know if it's the same lady. I didn't open the door the third time, but like those diehard people who really love what you stand for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
times with consultants, they'll kind of push back and say, Haley, it's just an email. They can unsubscribe, they can delete it. It's just a text. They can say stop. And what I often say to that in a response, this is kind of getting more into the spam problem, people being blasted and inundated so much versus the scam problem, which is I'm doing deceptive tactics in my fundraising, but on the spam side, it is really impacting on people's
Yes.
well-being, especially those of us that are older in age. Like I'm a tech bro, sure. Like I know how to set up the email filters, whatever galore. We work with volunteers at Donor Organizer Hub that have had to make multiple new email addresses because Gmail has deemed their account too full of fundraising spam. And I had one woman tell me that she dreads getting up in the morning because one thing she used to love to do was to text with her son, who is in college. And she barely knows how to use a cell phone. That's fine. That's great. We love that. But like, she can't figure out how to text her son because she's so inundated with all of these fundraising texts from Democratic PACs.
Yeah.
And when you hit at this nervous system of losing people's will to live, that's where I'm kind of like, I really am not believing the means to the ends game. Like, we are losing the
right.
whole sight of purpose here.
Right. Yeah. And then
Well, and I live in PA, and I've told Mary this before during the last presidential election. I mean, I got 2 or 3 text messages every day about not about fundraising. They knew I was poor, about just voting. Like it was just
Hmm.
voting. I wasn't on a fundraising. It was just like you're voting, right? And I was like, dude, if you tell me one more time, like if you ask me one more time if I'm voting, I'm gonna lose it. Like I've already decided that like by text 89,000, so I can't imagine
yeah.
if I had any money,
Yeah.
you
It
know.
kind of parlays into that same ethical question, Josh, that we talked about is the email buying, right? So, in order to have this happen, you have to acquire emails and phone numbers. And talk to us about what your thoughts are on that, because there are organizations out there. There's L2, there's various others. I've been on calls, to be honest with you, where organizations encourage candidates to swap their email addresses and phone numbers to use them for fundraising. There's two arguments, there's two sides of the coin on that one. You're expanding your reach, you're doubling down. But what are your thoughts on that? Because that opens up another whole can of worms, and where do we go with that?
Well, I don't even have to get into the morality of it. Act Blue, Action Network, Bonterra, any of the progressive tooling that you're using for emailing, for texting, for collecting donations, their account use policy bans the purchasing of uh, donor and voter and volunteer data. It bans the swapping. It bans anything where there has not been a consent-based relationship in receiving that.
Yeah.
It
Talk to
just
the
it just
audience
it
and
restricts their account
it
use.
just,
Like, you could be booted
yeah.
off.
You have doing it off. Absolutely. So talk to the audience about, we hear this term, and I talk to candidates about this all the time, and Josh and I have dealt with this, the opt-in process. Like,
Mhm.
so somebody, you're running for office and your county party hands you an email list and you want to dump it into your MailChimp or your Constant Contact, and you're trying to get volunteers to come to the potluck supper, to have a community organization meeting, etc. But what is this opt-in process that's supposed to happen as you're trying to build? Because if you try to take shortcuts, is what I'm getting at before we get into your conversation, these are the challenges you're going to run into.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry for laughing, Mary. Potluck supper was the most Midwest thing I have ever heard you say.
It's
Like,
what
I
the
know
county
you're
parties
from
do.
Massachusetts, but the Indiana is rubbing off the fact that you said potluck supper. So
It's
sorry. I
really,
didn't mean to laugh in the
no,
middle
you
of
can do
your,
that.
yeah.
The funny thing is
Yeah.
my dad's here from Massachusetts, and last night when we were at dinner with my dad, I was called out for saying, "Wow, there's the Irish Boston accent coming out in you." I was really like drawing out my R's, and it's funny.
Yeah.
I'm switching in terms of my location. That's funny.
It's probably because I grew
But
Yeah.
up in
yeah, hey, but yeah, like Haley, I come from like the corporate side, right? We work with for profits. I run a marketing agency, so email buying like is a every client wants to do it.
Yep.
Like they think it's like a easy like hot button thing, very very common. So to even hear that there are people like organizations that are like you're not allowed to do it, like so
Well,
yeah,
and
what
like,
is
and
this?
lovingly, I would say maybe, it's commonplace, but it's also actually against MailChimp and other
Yeah.
email and
Right.
CRM softwares account
We
usage.
don't even encourage it because the open rate is so low. It's a
Well, that's the
waste
thing
of
too.
our
It's
team's
like,
time.
Yeah.
it's
We don't like it.
deliverability
But
is king, queen, non-binary royalty at this point, and
Right.
buying
Right.
right.
emails is going to absolutely tank the deliverability, the open rate, all of these things when it comes to your emails. But going back to your question, Mary, specifically, something that kind of the originators of the digital strategy, movement on the left, so Move On, Credo Mobile, what they would do is so if they wanted Move On people to, learn about or sign up for this email organization, they would do the blast themselves as Move On, being like, hey, I think you should join,
Yes.
Mary for X, roles email list. Here's a
Hmm.
link to do that. So the county party example, the county party would then reach out and say, hey, we really believe in this candidate because X, Y, and Z. We strongly encourage you to join their email list. Here's that link. And
Yeah.
so, as
Absolutely.
a local candidate, you can partner with the county party to develop that messaging and help them execute that. So then you're building your list. And honestly, we just need to have a little more of a organic list building culture. Like, there should be sign-in sheets at every single gathering you're at. Every time you meet somebody and you grab a business card, ask them right then and there, do you
Hmm.
mind if I add you to my email list?
Hmm.
Do you mind if I add you to my
Absolutely.
text list?
Yes, our dear friend Aram with Change Agent has now made it very easy for you to use those sign-in sheets and get them very automatically up into the
Amazing.
AI that will create your database and add it to your database. And that is so important. I think it goes back to we're all in this together in
Mhm.
terms of tipping your hat to a new candidate coming on board and introducing them to the community. If you're a seasoned campaign candidate and you're not running, Elise Salakin is doing that right now. She is not running right now, but I have received several emails for her for other, and I call this out. Thank you, Elise Salakin, for doing this. Other female senators that's running. I've noticed that other female candidates that are running, she's
Mhm.
giving them access, an introduction. Then I can opt into the referral that she's recommending. But yeah, that's another way around it. So really good. But thank you for doing that and standing up for that because, like I said, it's accountability. We do this in the corporate sector. We have these tough conversations so we can better ourselves and move forward for the cause, right?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Now, and Mary, feel free to stop me if I'm jumping the gun a little. I'm curious about the texting side because that's
Mhm.
kind of the new era of this is
Yes.
like phone buying and like
Mm-hmm.
text buying and that kind of stuff too. And this is kind of where you got your start too,
Right.
right? If
Mhm.
so, is like, do you view this a little differently just because you love it more, or is this kind of the same?
I think there's a world where we could have lived in an ideal world, Josh, where, texting could have been used as a field tool. Like when I was running peer to peer texting programs at Red to Blue Texting, we would text for down ballot candidates like, hey, Josh, this candidate is having a potluck in your neighborhood. It's at this church, childcare provided. There's going to be food and snacks. Do you want to come by? You know, Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Or,
If this is a real thing, I am in. Food
yeah,
and childcare, I
right?
am in. Yeah,
So you look at that, which is it's community building, it's getting name recognition
right.
out there, versus the junk that we receive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of those things of like, what we could have versus what we deserve. And I think that we deserve to move to a world, very unfortunately, where it is opt-in text only, which is really tough
Yes.
because uh, ballot curing is critical, for example, right? Like
Yes.
that's, can make or break a very, very close race. And, at the same time, that is not 99.9% of the experiences that we all have when
Yeah. Yeah.
political causes are texting our phones. And so
Well,
I do have that parallel of, email, opt in, text, also opt in at this
yeah.
point. Because we
I'm
don't
shaking my
perfect
head.
things. We're ruining our tools.
That's exactly what I was going to jump in and say, and this is where we were on the same page. I could see the synergy happening here. Apple has just, because we've been spamming each other so much, is even changed their texting rules as of August 31st in
Yep.
terms of the filter. Your number has to be in the contact. So now you're damaging the through and the hit rate and the ability to get people to get into your community ecosystem, which is really the number one thing we want to do, is bring people into community so we
Mhm.
can engage with them and then take them up the engagement ladder. But if you're blocking step one because of the tactics, the unethical tactics, it makes this challenging for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw the degradation very quickly when it was, I think, maybe late 2017, early 2018. We would automatically shut down any texting campaign that got below a 12% response rate. Any
Ooh.
texting campaign. Toward the end of 2020, we saw below 5% response rates. And
Yeah.
our messaging was not changing. We were
Right.
not, entering these deceptive tactics. We were still asking, hey, Josh, do you want to come hang out at this church, backyard, 2 to 4? But because of the tragedy of the commons, it just tanked it for everybody.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of true with any marketing technique, and that's kind of
Mhm.
the problem for our candidates and for our entrepreneurs is how to keep up with that. Like
Mhm.
this year, I think it was LinkedIn outreach, right? Like I think that was a big one where LinkedIn outreach was a great way to do one-on-one touch points with like local people, like for sponsors or for donors, like things like that to connect. And then immediately someone figured out how to automate it and it immediately like went down. And I was talking with an entrepreneur and I was like, well, what's your response rate? And they're like, it's at about like a 0.5%. And I was like, a 0.5%? That's the worst. Like, that is so low. Like, you're sending out like the maximum number. I think it's like 15 requests a day and getting 0.5% responses back. That's
Yep.
terrible. And it's just because there's so many of these bots that are doing this now.
Right.
And so trying to find this balance of how do you keep that personal aspect to it and the ethical aspect so that you don't burn people out, but also being aware someone else is going to burn them out.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, perfect segue, Josh, because I pulled this quote off your website, because this is, and then we're going to get into the how to answer that question. what you said on your website was very clear because there's room to grow. We just have to realize it, not just get stuck in the old ways because it was a quick fix and a quick reaction to get some results. What you stated on your website is there's plenty of room to grow our impact. Only 1% of all Americans gave $200 or more to political causes in 2024. And in 2022, it was 0.5%. So,
Nice.
this is a great segue into your book because you really start breaking down how to get to that. How do we start bringing people in an ethical way that really builds what you talk about at the core of it is connection, relationship, and shared vision and values. So let's start talking about it. So, your book, I really want you to you broke it up really, really well. The Accidental Fundraiser, you really provide step by step guidance on how to get into this fundraising without getting into the weeds of, back to our further conversation. There's a right way to do this. Talk about part one, because I love how you say, don't skip this part. This is the foundation. Don't jump, get to work, which we all do. We want to go to the back of the book for the quick fix.
Yep.
Don't do that. Let's talk about the beginning part of the book because you really lay the foundation that fundraising is really about building community. And when you kind of get that, then the sky's the limit. So talk about how you started laying out the book and really lean into don't skip the front part.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that because the front part is my favorite part, part one. So part one of the Accidental Fundraiser gets into you can do it sort of attitude. If you're looking to raise $10,000 for a friend's top surgery or for a neighbor-based project that you really care about, you've never done it before, you don't have a budget, and you're nervous, but you can still do it. You can still raise 10,000 bucks. That's one part of it. And the other part is how do you build a baseline team when you've never done this before? So taking on the piece of you can do it, not only you can do it, but you should do it if you have a progressive cause that you deeply care about, because fundraising is admittedly the quickest way to get the word out about your cause of any other community building method out there. So more people donate, then they vote, then they go to church, than any other civic engagement activity. And so more people donate, then they go to church, then they vote, than any other community or civic engagement activity. We want to align there's this concept of we want to align our actions with our beliefs. So we all want to believe that we are generous human beings. And a great way to do that, to demonstrate to ourselves and to others that we're generous beings, is the opportunity to donate. So a lot of times when people come in, at first they think, oh my God, I'm just begging my friends and it's a tough time and not everybody has money right now. But flipping the script and saying like, actually, Josh, I want to invite you to donate $5 to this cause that you deeply care about because I know it's going to have XYZ impact. Your $5 is going to go somewhere. So having that mindset shift really allows for people to see, because there is a very different experience of when we donate money versus when we ask for it. When we donate, we feel good about ourselves. When we ask, we often at first feel very nervous. But remembering that we're giving people the opportunity to feel good and get the message out there about our cause is the way to kind of propel it forward. The parts of building a team, fundraising is fun as long as you don't do it alone. So if I have any solopreneurs out there that are listening, you're running very down ballot and it's just you, or you are starting a new cause and you are the only one that's kind of moving it forward, we need at least three people to kind of do a thing. Otherwise, I mean, no great thing really happens alone, does it? Even the Steve Jobs and whatever the world, like, they have mentors, they have loved ones, they have other people that are behind them. And so building a team, just like any other team that you have going on, an organizing team, a field team, a data team, having a fundraising team allows for you to really be able to enjoy it and follow through on the steps that you take in part two, where you learn the strategies of how.
Yes, I think let's talk about that team building because I think that's so important. Because when I talk to campaigns and we call it a finance committee, I'm never going to call that anymore. I'm going to call it a team, a finance committee, a fundraising team. Because when you feel like you're part something bigger than yourself, it feels better. And don't think people realize some of the most successful campaigns, and we use the word campaign in the marketing world, whether it's a campaign for just one initiative or a political campaign, or the campaign for the, as I was saying to Josh, everybody's building pickleball courts in their community center, like a campaign for your, to get the pickleball court started and with lights at night so we can all play at night and put on the, a little bit warm fuzzies in the fall. There's a way to do that if you're part of the team. And I don't think people realize that, like, when you look at a presidential election, there is a fundraising team with a head in, somebody in Indiana, somebody in Pennsylvania, somebody in California, that because there's nobody on that team that knows everybody, right? So you have to expand your network with your team because they know somebody and they know somebody and they bring in somebody in their Rolodex. Now, am I aging myself when I say the word Rolodex? To be,
and just the importance of building a list. And I think we've all had those like Kevin Bacon-esque experiences where it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize how close our connection was. We just met. We have a lot more rich people in our lives than we think. I think
mm-hmm.
there's some stat out there about like 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people in the U.S., even with our growing inequality, are technically millionaires when you talk about total assets right now still. So it's like more people have money than you think, and it really is about the connective tissue piece. It's maybe Josh, you yourself are not going to give my organization $1 million check, but you might know a couple people that would be down to throw down $5,000. These numbers are all made up here, but really just to say that the importance of fundraising everybody and not continually trying to say, oh, we need to find a minimum, $500 donor or $50,000 donor, is because no donor prospecting software is going to prospect our networks.
Yeah, you
They
start
don't
with your
know
networks.
who
Yeah.
who we know and who the people we know, especially when we're talking about, like lawyers, for example. Okay, maybe a public defender is running, but you know who a public defender went to law school with? Some corporate law sellout girlies that are trying to pay off their debt. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
always those connections, and it's important to take that time because there's that Dunbar's number of we only know 150 people off the top of our heads. So we need, and a donor organizer hub in our resource library. I can send you all the links so you can put it also in the notes for this episode. It helps get those questions of, did you go to summer camp as a kid, Josh? Who was there?
Yeah.
Neighborhood we
Those
lived in.
memory joggers.
Church.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep. I think you're nailing the point because I've heard candidates have come up to me and they feel boxed out, for lack of a better word, when they say, nobody gave me the list. They're hiding the list on me. And I tried to say to them, that list doesn't matter per se because that list might have been last year's candidates list because they had a relationship with them. So it's really important because every election cycle or when you're raising money, that relationship to that list is what's important. It's not the list. And they get so caught up in, if I just get that list, I'm going to be able to raise tons of dollars because they've got the golden nugget. And it's not the list that's the golden nugget, it's your relationship and how you develop that relationship. And we had a great conversation with Amanda Littman the other day. And it goes, what you're saying too is it's the relationships and it takes time to develop these things. I noticed that you had an amazing chart in your book, because this book, again, I keep saying is amazing, is it really sets the expectations. If you're going to raise $10,000, give yourself this much window of time to get there. If you're going to raise $10,000, this is the window of time. And so that sets people up for a better understanding of what success looks like and how to get there. And secondly, when we're talking about, fundraising and asking people for money for an organization or cause, the other thing that I like to tell candidates is you are the conduit for their vision too. So, you're just a piece of the equation and you're helping them build up the pickleball court or save the homeless shelter or help with the unfortunate incident that might have happened at the dog shelter and they need more fundraising for staffing or volunteers. So you're sharing those kinds of community needs, but you're lifting the lever for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And something, I would never tell an executive director of a nonprofit to abandon their major gifts program. I would never tell a candidate to
Right.
abandon their call time. But at the same
Right.
time, those efforts are only going to get us so far. And so I see us training and coaching more people on grassroots fundraising as integral as learning about first aid or de-escalation or other trainings that are being brought up right now in this very hot garbage fire environment that we're in right now. We all should know how to fundraise $1,000 on a dime. And I will say a little quick mic drop to the both of you, which is no matter who somebody is, what their class background is, who their networks are, we have never seen anyone raise less than $1,000 if they are trained and they have coaching support to raise that
Mm-hmm.
said $1,000. So when people say, I don't know anybody with money, I don't have any, I mean, that stat speaks for itself. Like, I have coached some really
Okay.
broke folks. I come from some really broke folks in my family, and that $1,000 can still be hit. You can raise four figures no matter what your background.
Okay, we're going to start diving into that because, Josh, can I just say one thing? Because I think what I want to talk about is you made a really good point about we all know the candidates have to spend 40 to 50% amount of their time doing call time. But you don't start there. You don't just have the list. It starts with building your foundation, building your relationships, building your reputation. Because then when you make those calls or you get in community and you go to those events, other people will, networks will get opened the door for you. And I think that's where we have to start the core of what, community organizing and fundraising is. Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
There are three different categories of strategies that we talk about of how to fundraise. So one is direct asks, meaning I go and ask Josh for money in some way, shape, or form. The second is gatherings, community gatherings. So getting in a social space to be together to do the fundraising. The third is selling goods or services. And the reason that we group these this way is different causes are going to have different goals, priorities, or interests. So if you want to raise a lot of money quickly, and we say it very straight up in the chapter, going for the direct asks bucket is going to get you the personal, I call Josh, I say, hey, Josh, I have this really exciting project that's going on in our neighborhood, and I would love to talk to you about it. We're looking to fundraise for it, and I would love for you to contribute. Do you have time to talk about it next week? I'm available XYZ dates. Then I go to Josh and I talk him through the project. I ask him what he cares about and is excited about. Oh my God, it matches because you're part of the neighborhood. Josh, I would love to ask you for 25 bucks to help us raise to our $500 goal. That's the quickest way to do it. The big trade-off is, people are hesitant about fundraising. So, training a bunch of askers takes time. Then we have community gatherings, and that is especially useful if you're not just doing a one time project, but you're really looking to build a broader community to connect with your constituents, with your clients, with, however your cause is structured. So, take some event planning like work, but it also really brings in that joy. We're in an isolation crisis, people. And then the third category is selling goods and services. And this is a great category for those where maybe they're nervous about fundraising or they think that their people aren't going to care about the cause a lot. They would just want their car washed or they want to go to a garage sale. And so that category is very useful in those circumstances. So at a high level, you can kind of figure out with your team when you build that sort of initial core team, what kind of fundraising do we want to do? What are the other goals beyond total dollars raised that we're trying to get at here? You know, a garage sale is great if I want to get rid of a bunch of clothes I've had stored in my closet for a long time too. Getting together a bunch of neighbors that kind of know each other but not really is really great for a house party. And if we just need a lot of money real quick, let's get to the direct asking.
Right, right. And I love the layers you put in there because I know when I think of my close circle, there's always the party person that loves to have the gatherings. Okay, that's me. I'm always the cooker. I love to have the gatherings. I always have the fundraisers here. And other people love to do the selling. And when you said selling, all I could think of, again, I'm going to age myself, Gen X here. Hebert candy was always the fundraiser. The white chocolate was what we sold when we were little kids. The Girl Scout cookies, right? So those are classics, and people love to get them in community and remember the nostalgia and do them again. So you could create a really good annual fundraiser and grow it from there, right?
I
I
am
rose
dying for a
thousands
Girl
of
Scout.
dollars.
Look at you
I
guys. You're
rose
like,
thousands of dollars with a Boy Scout popcorn.
Popcorn, I
And
love
I'm
the popcorn. Unpopular opinion, I prefer the popcorn to the cookies.
okay, here's the thing though. Girl Scout cookies were good and relatively cheap. Boy Scout popcorn, bad, overpriced, and I had to go door to door in that hot ass uniform in the
oh, I'm
summer
laughing right
in
now.
Boy Scouts, knocking door to door, getting that was miserable. I raised thousands of dollars and I got like a fishing rod at the end, and I was like, yes. Thinking back, I raised like 9 grand and I
Yep.
got a fishing rod. I was like, man, I would rather the 9 grand.
Yep.
Like, what? Where did that money go? Like,
For
who got that? Yeah, like what?
Right.
for
Your camping
listeners,
trip.
for listeners that are the age of say 24 and younger, what we unofficially call that donor organizer hub is the cuteness factor. It can be leveraged with your parents, your relatives' friends. It
Hmm.
extends beyond when you're the 9-year-old, as Josh was, knocking door to door. It is also relevant when you're in high school, when you're in college, and when you're like a handful of years outside of college. So, take without what you will, squeeze what you can
Right.
get.
We just had the Boy Scout come around, and my husband it was the weekend, and my husband said, "Hey, do you have, I need another $5, $10." I forget what it was. And I was like, "Why?" I'm buying some popcorn from the Boy Scout. He comes around every year. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I said, "How much do you need?" He said, $25. And I said, "Oh, I know my husband. He's probably buying the whole king caboodle that he has. I'm thinking 3 or 4, maybe 5 bags, right? No, he comes in with the
Yeah.
bag that's literally this big.
Yeah.
And people forget that they will support an organization if it's a good cause. Because my husband was like, "Oh, it's the Boy Scouts. Who cares about the $25? He's out there pounding the pavement, making relationships." But here's the point, Josh, you made a really good point. The Girl Scouts are still out there selling their $5 box and the margin on that is really small. So you really got to think about your audience, what you're doing. And you, I guess what I like to say about this is don't choose a dollar amount or an effort or a channel or a strategy based on what you perceive the market will bear, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of people have a tendency to fundraise what they are comfortable with, but don't do that. The Boy Scout, Girl Scout example is perfect example. The boys are selling these little bags for $25 and the girls are still selling little boxes for 5, and the margins on those are way different. So just
Well,
saying.
and you also got to remember the Girl Scouts were selling like outside of Walmart, right? Like we were going door to door. Like my parents would drop us off in like the rich neighborhoods,
Yeah, yep, that's what.
and we would go door to door and sell
Yep.
like the big tins, like that you thought your husband bought for $25 that you could buy
Yep.
for $25 at Walmart. I mean, those were $150 that we would sell.
Wow.
So, like, we were going to the rich neighborhoods and selling. So, also build your products for your community
Yeah.
too. So, like, there's a lot of that as well. So, it's really about the cause and then building your goods and services for your community.
Yeah.
So, sorry to derail us with my
Boy
um,
Scout analogy.
Boy Scout stories. But like we also sold things out of Walmart, but they were like homemade baked goods, which is so sketchy. I don't know how anyone bought homemade baked goods outside of Walmart from a bunch of middle
You're
school boys.
destroying. You're
But
destroying.
we bought hundreds and well, like we
I
sold
want to
thousands
believe.
of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've watched too many British detective series now based on COVID, and I still do because my husband's British. And that's how people poison their husbands is through the baked goods. So yeah, I don't think I would buy something homemade anymore. No, no, nope, not doing it. So the
Different era.
package, yeah, different era. Okay, so final question for you, or just want to kind of wrap up here because we've had such a really good conversation about what's possible. I really say that I had the gift of working with a company, and one of the key ethos was live in possibility. And what you're really outlining is fundraising doesn't have to be scary. There's a way to do it. There's a strategy. The engineering process in you has really taken that skill set and laid it out for everybody. After you kind of set the strategy and the nuts and bolts, you really go into the last part of the book where you really outline your 9 strategies. Give us a little shortened version of what is embedded in that last part so then people can get really excited about going and exploring the book for themselves.
Yeah. So for each of the 9 strategies, If you imagine the most organized and meticulous person in your life, it's that person in your life that kind of wrote those sections. So we go through step by step. How do you carry out a house party? How do you host a pledge based fundraiser? And we provide a work plan at the end of each chapter. So it shows across, week 1 to week 8 or however long it's supposed to take, what you're supposed to do each week. So once you have that team together and you've decided which strategy you want to go on, you flipped that chapter, that strategy, and it literally just kind of walks you through, okay, Josh, you have to start off with building a list of confirmed volunteers. Okay, next, what you're going to do is set a date. Just kind of like boop, 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 boop. So the idea is there's not any grayscale. It actually is very crystal clear if you're just, the mindless monkey that can follow step by step.
That's awesome.
So
And so,
so I think for like both candidates and entrepreneurs when they're getting started, they don't have money, they
Yep.
don't really have a lot of time,
Yep.
right? Like what is the like where should they be starting, right? No time, no money. How do they get one of those with the limited time they have? How do they get some money first?
They have to get a team. That is literally the first step. Like, do not proceed solopreneur. You need at least a couple people to host a house party.
yeah.
You need at least a couple of people to start doing the direct one-on-one asks. I mean, call time's great. We're not going to get rid of it, but we need to enhance it by adding more people. And so that would be the very first step: is get your team together. If there are not at least 3 of you all together, that is not a team.
Gotcha. Yeah. One of my all-time favorite people. You're gonna hear me mention her a lot on the podcast. Abby Wambach, one of the U.S. women's soccer team, all-time favorite. Every time she scored a goal, she turned around and she pointed to her team. I didn't get this goal by myself. So yeah, that's great.
In
That's
terms
great.
of if you're thinking strategies in particular, I would bet with the little amount of time, you should probably be focusing on the personal asks, arena, and then also the social and community activities. House parties are pretty low key to set up. So thinking about how you can get the money quickly, which you can do with those direct asks, and then thinking about how you're building the community, which you can do with house parties in particular.